Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serena, and in today's video we're going to be sewing up something more casual today. It's actually an outfit that I saw in one of my department store catalogs. I can't remember if it's a Sears or a Montgomery Ward's, but either way, right now I am sewing to fill gaps in my wardrobe. I always prioritize the flashy and the glamour over practicality, and that's because I don't usually have to. I drive, so I can always like put the heat up and things like that. And so now that I'm gearing up for my Corvair to be running and it does not have air conditioning, I need to prioritize some cool weather outfits for being able to drive in semi-harsh conditions. I'm going to be using some Backroom Finds patterns as well as fabric to create this piece. Before we get started, I do want to thank Anne for purchasing something off of my Amazon wish list. I actually got some cotton belting or webbing, which I do use for my belting now. I've upgraded from standard interfacing, so I'm so appreciative for all of the extra support. It means the world to me. Thank you again. So if you're interested in seeing me sew up this project, go ahead and like and subscribe. And now let's get into the materials and the patterns I'll be using. So this is the inspiration photo on the left, and I'll be using Advanced 8442 View 2 to make the coat in a corduroy. And for the pants, I'm using Simplicity 3257, and this is one of those proportioned patterns for the length. I did most of the pant off camera because I've made a pattern similar to this over and over and over again, and I figured it'd be quite boring, but I wanted to show off the fabric a bit. And this is the fabric that I got from Stephanie Canada, her website Backroom Find, and it's a beautiful true vintage fabric. It's reminiscent of the original. It's not quite the same, but it's such a pretty plaid, and I like the little speckles in it. Now this fabric is quite itchy, so I decided to line it with cotton so that way it's not touching my skin directly, but I still get the same look. Also for the pant, I went up a couple sizes in the waist so that way I could tuck in a lot of my thicker sweaters, flannels, and undershirts because I do tend to layer a lot in the winter. So all of my winter pants have a waistband that's like 3 sizes too big, so I can never wear these pants without something tucked in, otherwise it'll be way too big. And in the very end, you'll see how much extra space I have. I end up with like an inch or more of ease. Now for the jacket, this is pretty simple as attached sleeves, and it goes together very quickly. I did make this before last year, and I got a lot of questions on whether I made a video for it, so I decided to use this pattern again for this particular recreation because I wanted to share the process of making the jacket. So right now I'm working on the pocket. It's a patched pocket with a oversized like flap, and it is lined with satin, so the pocket is completely lined, and then you just top stitch it on top of the jacket front. I make these first, but I attach them after I put bound buttonholes onto the jacket, because if you've ever heard me talk about making bound buttonholes, that should be the first thing that you do on a jacket before you put on any of the pockets or sew in any darts. You want to make sure that you put all of your bound buttons first, so that way you make sure all of the buttons are aligned horizontally and they're not crooked. Because this pattern has an attached sleeve, we are going to put a gusset on the underarm of both the outer fabric as well as the lining, so that way you have that range of movement in your arms. So I'm reinforcing that opening because I'm going to have to cut that open in order to sew in the gusset. I am using a lighter weight corduroy for this because the vintage fabric that I'm going to use for the lining that matches the pant is quite heavy, so I don't want it to be bulky in a way that it looks funny. So that's why I'm going with this weight of fabric. Also, the original, it seems as though maybe the flannel or whatever fabric they used for the pant and the lining was much thinner than the outer fabric that they used for the coat, which would make a whole lot of sense. I couldn't tell what that fabric was, and I probably should have went back into the magazine to see if it was even noted, but I had already bought this green fabric. I prioritized finding the right shade of green as opposed to trying to match the fabric in the magazine. I am currently sewing up the shoulder seams on this pattern. This should have been quicker. When I made it the first time, it was a lot quicker, but I didn't have a lot going on. This was a heavy couple weeks. So it took me a lot longer because it took a lot more mental capacity than it usually does. So on one hand, I'm glad that I finally got this project off of my sewing list, my sewing to-do list. But on the other hand, I was quite disappointed with how long it took me to get done, because I definitely had more important things to do. And I kind of prioritized this because I knew it was going to be very quick to get out of the way. And I ended up spending more time than I anticipated. Nonetheless, I'm so happy that because I'm filming this video, it must mean that this project is done and I get to wear it out. And I finished just in time, because while I was sewing this project, it was very warm and now it's quite cold. So it's literally done just in time for me to wear it out. I also want to talk about the fabric a bit. I bought so much fabric from Backroom Finds last year. I think I did a haul. I need to do an update haul because I've gotten so much. Also, I would love to do an update haul on all of the projects I've completed with her, either patterns or fabric. I am so happy with everything that I've been able to make. I think, for one, I love shopping small. Two, it's really good to work with someone who cares about not only what she does, but who she's selling to. And so I am complaining about how itchy this fabric is, but it's not like she didn't warn me. And I feel like, oh, I can make it work just because I like the way that the fabric looks. And I did. It's not ideal, but also, to be fair, I am sensitive to wool and I bought a lot of her wool suiting. And so if I'm willing to work with wool, even though it makes me itch, then I'm not going to turn down any other fabric that makes me itch, as long as I can work around it. So this will not be the last fabric that I complain about itchiness, but in all fairness, Stephanie has warned me with every purchase if something was itchy, and I was like, nah, I can figure it out. So now it's time for me to sew up the sleeves. I did have to interface this so that way it holds the structure, because the sleeve is folded. I don't think this is necessary if you are using like a more outerwear fabric. Like the first time I made it, this was unnecessary. I did put it in there anyway, but that other piece that I made was quite heavy and it really holds its shape. So I added it on here because I told you that this corduroy is lightweight. It's almost like if I would have made this without the lining, I could have used this for like a shacket. So yeah, so now I am working on getting the cuffs on there and sewing the under collar for this. The original has a more pointy style traditional collar, and this one has a Peter Pan collar, which I really like. So while I'm not going to be copying the original identically, I will be taking the steps to make it lean more to the original, which would be to top stitch around the collar and the openings of the jacket, which is what I'm going to do here. I could have top stitched the bottom of the jacket, but I didn't because the lining isn't secured at the bottom. It's loose, so I didn't want to top stitch that and make it look funny. I guess I can always go back and do that, but I just chose not to do it. I didn't think it was necessary. Now I'm sewing the facing onto the jacket, and once the facing is on, I flip it over inside out, I press it, and then I do all of the top stitching that's necessary before I go in and add the lining. Because the top stitching wasn't included in the original design, I decided to go with a 3/8 seam allowance for my top stitch, and I did that all the way around. Now it's time to make the lining, and it's very similar to the outer jacket, so not much has changed, but I wanted to put in some footage of working with this fabric so you can get an idea of what it really looks like. Okay, and so now if you're wondering, SewRena, why would you line a fabric that you lined with the pants so it wouldn't touch your skin? Why would you use that as a lining as a jacket? Well, it's because that was part of the allure of the original outfit or inspiration. However, because this is something that I'm going to be wearing in the cooler months, I assume that I'll be wearing sleeves under this, so technically whatever I wear will already protect me from the lining fabric. But as an added measure, I did line most of the sleeve with cotton, so the sleeve itself won't be touching me. So as long as I'm wearing a quarter length sleeve, I'll be protected from the itchiness of the fabric, which I did test this theory. And by line, I just cut out rectangles of cotton and top stitch it over the top of the sleeves where I didn't want the lining to touch me. So it's not like this fancy lining or anything like that. Because of this discrepancy between the thickness of the lining and the cotton, I didn't want to cut it out like a quilt block. I didn't want to lose the weight of the plaid fabric, so that's why I just top stitch a square of fabric on top of it. Otherwise, I could have gone through the long route of putting cotton batting behind the cotton, so that way it could like bulk up the fabric. It just was too much, and I didn't want to do all of that. I was already spending more than enough time on this project, and I didn't want to make it more difficult than it needed to be. So for the gusset, I just used cotton for the gusset, since that's going to be directly underneath my arm, and also it makes it less bulky at that seam as well. I do need to make a new red undershirt, but for the purposes of this video, I just used a red shirt that I already had, which is velvet, and it doesn't really go well with this project, but it's for you to get the idea. I have to go shopping for some knit so I can make a new mock turtleneck to properly match this, but I was just going to use what I had. If you've made it this far, please consider liking this video or subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. I truly appreciate you being here. This is the final look. As mentioned earlier, this is not as fitted as the original because I do plan on being able to really tuck things into the waistband and just have comfort, since it's going to be for sitting around in the car and things like that. I didn't want it too tight against my waistband because every time I sneeze, I always lose my hook and bar. If you would like to support me any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon. We would love to have you. Also, check out my Etsy shop SewRena. I have some holiday towels in there for sale. Of course, the best free way to support me is to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. Thank you again, Anne, for sending me that webbing, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!